Is it that speaker there that has to pick up our voice?
Yes.
Or will this?
It's both. That's for the recording. This is for the people on the phone to hear.
He's
you.
giving you a thumbs up.
Ah, okay, great. I don't know where Paul is.
I don't know. I think he's in the back room.
Is he in the back room or is he in the bathroom? Okay, well, we're ready. Well, he's not gonna make roll call. I'll give him, I don't know where he disappeared.
I hear something back there.
He said he's not back there. He went out that door.
Alien the drug.
I don't know, we're missing one of our. I keep hearing noises, but I don't see a person.
Ready?
Cool.
We're ready.
Okay. Okay, we're ready to go.
It's coming.
Okay. Going to call to order the town board meeting for Monday, March 23rd. As you will recognize, we have an alternative way tonight that we are going to be able to hold our meeting. You can go to windsorgov.com/meetings on demand to watch us on video, to watch us live as we're streaming. And we are practicing our safe social distancing. That's why you'll notice how we're all spread out in the chambers tonight. So, welcome everybody. And with that, Ms. Iker, will you please take roll call?
Mayor Christy Melendez,
Here?
Mayor Pro Tem Ken Bennett,
Here.
Miles Baker,
Here.
Barry Wilson,
Here.
Paul Rennemeyer,
Here.
Tom Jones,
Here.
David Soslowski.
Here.
Okay. Will you please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next item is review of agenda.
Madam Mayor, I move that we approve the agenda as presented this evening.
Second.
We have a motion on the floor from Mr. Rennemeyer and a second from Mayor Pro Tem Bennett to approve the agenda as presented. And we are going to be doing a roll call vote for all of our voting. So with that, signify with aye to accept the agenda as presented.
Aye.
Opposed? It's approved unanimously to move forward with the agenda as presented. Before we go into board liaison reports, I want to acknowledge the members of the public who are participating virtually in tonight's meeting. We want to give everyone a chance to make sure the volume on their computer or device is turned on. If you have a question or comment you wish to give us, please use the Q&A feature if you are on a computer, or be ready to listen for your name or phone number. We know it takes a moment for everyone to gather their thoughts, and it can take a couple of minutes to type in questions. So this is just a warning that in a moment, we will take up public comment portion of the meeting. So with that, we are going to move into board liaison reports. Town Board Member Baker, Tree Board and Historic Preservation Commission.
Thank you. I have no update at this time.
Town Board Member Wilson, Parks, Recreation, and Culture Advisory Board, Poudre River Trail Corridor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. No reports this week.
Mayor Pro Tem Bennett, Water and Sewer Board.
No report at this time.
Town Board Member Rennemeyer, Chamber of Commerce.
I do have a report, since we did have our regularly scheduled monthly board meeting since our last town board meeting a couple weeks ago. The Chamber of Commerce Board moved at the last board meeting to immediately request the immediate or accepted the resignation of the Chamber President and CEO, effective immediately instead of the requested end of April date that was requested by the former president and CEO. The chamber has received and has closed the application process for the next president, CEO, or executive director. I'm not sure exactly what the new title of the next leader of the chamber will be. And they are in the midst of forming a hiring committee to review all of the applications, and that date has not been set yet. So I hope to know more in the next couple weeks as to when they will review the applications that have been received. And there are supposedly, through the grapevine, I do not know who they are, but they're down to 11 applicants at this point. So they still have to whittle them down more before they get to doing interviews and put the interviewing committee together. So yeah, with that, that's the end of my report.
Okay. Town Board Member Jones, Windsor Housing Authority, Great Western Trail Authority.
Windsor Housing Authority canceled their meeting, as many other boards have this past couple weeks. Great Western Trail Authority advertised for bids on March 10th for 5.5 miles of trail. Tomorrow there will be a virtual pre-bid conference with those interested in bidding on the project. It'll be conducted via Zoom. But we are offering, if any of the potential contractors want to go out and see part of the trail or any parts of the trail, we'll be taking them out there for an actual tour. And that's all I have.
Town Board Member Kozlowski, Clearview Library Board, Planning Commission.
Thank you, Mayor. The Planning Commission was last Wednesday. It was a fairly late agenda. I did not attend. It was, again, conducted by video conference. The library board is coming up this Thursday. They will be holding their board meeting as a online video conference as well. If anyone did want to dial in, I think they're using the same systems that we're using here, but the information for that should be on the library website.
Okay, thank you. I have North Front Range MPO. I don't have a report, but all future meetings are going to be virtual video conferencing as well, at least for the time being. I know April's is already set up to be that way. Downtown Development Authority, we did have a virtual conference call last week, and mainly it's centered around the discussion like we just had in our work session was ways and ideas and thoughts of how we can be supportive and right now of local business and how we can best, what we can do in this time. They wanted to see what the town board was going to come up with before they rolled out any of their thoughts and ideas. And I know their director was part of a business listening conversation that our economic development director, Stacy Miller, hosted this last week that many of us were part of. And so I think that both the DDA and the town board, we will continue to look at ways that we can help our business folks because we know this is a challenging time for everybody. But if we all move through this process and work together, I believe we will make it and we will work through it all together. So that's all I have at this point in time. Moving on to number 6, public invited to be heard. Now that we're going to be opening up for public comment, we have allowed for comment via email or through the Zoom platform during this meeting. If you are participating via computer, please enter your question or comment in the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen. If you are on the phone, please listen for your name or phone number as the moderator will call out who is allowed to speak at that time. We will unmute participants one at a time, at which time you will be given 3 minutes to speak. At this time, we will pause for a moment to allow people one more chance to get situated and get questions in or be ready on the line. And Jess is going to give us a thumbs up or down if we have anybody who wants to do public comment. Do you see anything? Okay. We don't see anybody who wishes to make public comment at this time, so we're going to move on the agenda to item B, which is the consent calendar. In the consent calendar, we have minutes of the February 24th, 2020 regular town board meeting and resolution 2020-21. Is there a motion to accept the consent calendar?
Madam Mayor, I move that we accept the consent calendar as presented this evening.
Second.
Motion on the floor from Mr. Rennemeyer with a second from Mr. Wilson, approving the consent calendar as presented. All in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Consent calendar is approved as presented. Moving on then to board action. Our first item this evening is resolution number 2020-22, a resolution declaring a local disaster emergency and ratifying the town manager's prior declaration. Legislative action, and Mr. McCarger will give us presentation. Mr. McCarger.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. What's before you tonight is a resolution that's required under state law if you want to extend a local disaster emergency declaration that was issued by the town manager on March 17. The law provides that the chief executive officer of a municipality may issue the declaration, but that it has a clock, a shelf life of 7 days, unless legislative action is taken to extend it. This resolution extends the March 17th emergency declaration, the primary benefit of which is to assure that should federal funding or state funding or any revenue stream be available, they often require that a disaster declaration be in place to render us eligible to receive those dollars. So that's why this resolution is before you, and that is why the town manager issued his declaration on March 17th. That's all I've got.
Okay. Questions, comments from the board?
Mayor?
Yes, Mr. Sislowski.
Yeah, my only question is that the resolution is drafted, has it remaining effective until rescinded by the town manager. The actual declaration itself that was adopted a few days ago, that resolution indicated that it would be effective for 7 days unless rescinded by the town board. So I'm just curious, Mr. McCarver, if there is a material difference or distinction between the town manager being able to rescind this, whereas the prior resolution was rescinded only by the town board as a whole.
The question, as I understand it, just for the benefit of those who are listening, is that the resolution before you tonight refers to the disaster declaration being rescinded by the town manager, and the actual disaster declaration that was issued by the town manager has it set for potential rescission by the town board. What's before you tonight is a resolution that extends the declaration, but also provides specifically for how it will be rescinded, and in this case, it would be rescinded by the town manager, presumably after consultation with members of the town board.
Okay, anything further?
No.
Okay. Any further questions? If not, is there a motion to approve this resolution?
Madam Mayor, I move that we approve resolution number 2020-22.
Second.
A motion on the floor from Mr. Rennemeyer with a second from Dr. Jones approving resolution number 2020-22. Any further comments or questions? If not, I would I would acknowledge, all in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The resolution passes unanimously. Moving on to item 2, ordinance number 2020-1605, an emergency ordinance concerning the coronavirus COVID-19 public health emergency and authorizing the exercise of emergency powers in association therewith. Legislative action, supermajority vote is required to pass this. Mr. McCarger?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. What's before you tonight in the form of an ordinance is a policy decision by you authorizing and granting to the town manager certain extraordinary powers in light of the COVID-19 coronavirus emergency under which we are currently operating. I should first point out that the ordinance makes it very clear that all of these powers are exercised subject to consultation with the mayor, which grants to the town manager a certain level of comfort that the legislative body of the town of Windsor, that being you, will have some voice in the town manager's exercise of these sweeping powers, which I will refer to more specifically later. The other thing is that the ordinance remains in effect until the mayor proclaims in writing that it is rescinded, which is another important balance, if you will, balance of powers provision in this ordinance. The idea here is to preserve the separation of powers that is built into the council manager form of government established under the charter. If I'm speaking really slowly, it's because I want folks who are listening to try to absorb all of this. So forgive me if I'm sounding like I'm a robot up here tonight. Probably the most important provisions are found in the powers issued to the town manager in section 6. So I do want to give some specific attention to that, and I will loop back to some of the others. The first is that there are 2 powers that are subject to a 72-hour clock unless extended by official action of the town board. The first is the establishment of curfews, and the other is the closure of businesses. This is an important power, obviously, but one that the town board has indicated through communication with the town manager that it wants to reserve, and so that provision is built into those 2 powers, a 72-hour shelf life, if you will. But in addition to that, the town manager has the power to order evacuations, add regulations as to conduct of persons, meetings, suspensions, financial powers, the allocation of both human and capital resources, which is really already a power granted to the town manager under the charter, and also the power to limit the use of town-owned facilities, including closing them if necessary. Then there is a general grant of emergency response powers, the suspension of ordinances and other time-consuming procedures that might inhibit emergency response. These are all powers that are granted to the town manager, but after consultation with the mayor. So there is an outreach built into this to the legislative body. Section 7 provides that law enforcement has the power, as directed by the town manager, to enforce these decisions and policies. Although the ordinance will be published, as we usually do when it comes to policy decisions by this body, I am also going to recommend that we broadcast this as plentifully as we can to make sure that people are aware of what the powers are, because this ordinance basically makes it a presumption that people are on notice of the town manager's powers under this ordinance. There is a provision in Section 8 that authorizes town employees, upon a display of proper credentials, to enter private property to respond to an emergency if there are reasonable grounds to support it. That's a legal standard that has been defined by the courts, and so that's why we're using that expression. And it also requires that the town employees who wish to do that must display their credentials. Section 9 is a broad section that sets up meetings like this and meetings that may not look very much like this. What it provides is that meetings can be attended electronically, remotely, such as what we will expect to see over the coming months, but also allows, unlike in the past, allows for voting electronically, voting by remote means. What we have done, however, is built into this that your vote does not take effect unless you, in writing, affirm it within 24 hours. Ms. Eicher is going to have those forms ready for distribution the morning after these meetings. And so I ask that you all keep your eyes on your email inboxes so that you can turn those forms around quickly for her, because there is a very short clock during which you have the power or have the expectation that you will affirm those votes in writing. The reason we're doing that is that there is some heartburn legally over convening quasi-judicial matters where the actual decision makers aren't in the room. You're in the room virtually. And so if you cast a vote virtually, what we ask is that those votes be affirmed in writing within 24 hours. This language,
Mr. McCarter,
yes, ma'am.
what is a non-response considered? I don't think anybody would not intentionally not respond, but what if one of them has an emergency, and then do you just take that as how do you take that? As a no vote or as a?
The vote doesn't count.
Okay.
So we would not count it.
Okay.
It's not a no, but it's not a yes.
So it'd be just six,
Yes.
it passed with 6 votes or something?
Or it could be 4-2 or whatever.
Okay.
Yep. I also want to note that this ordinance gives the municipal judge the power to convene court virtually, convene court remotely. I don't know whether Judge Blau and the clerk's office and the town prosecutor have made up their minds about that. It probably depends on how long this situation is prolonged. And it also, at least at this time, the court has put off court appearances for a month or so, just so you're aware of that. Section 10 of the ordinance authorizes us to access the emergency reserves that are built into the Tabor Taxpayer Bill of Rights, constitutional amendment. And I think the significance of that is that if we do access those dollars, it doesn't change the formula and would not compel a refund when our revenues or our expenses exceed the Tabor limits that are built into our finances. Section 11 states that if there's a conflict between this ordinance and the charter wins. And that should be obvious to all of us, that the charter prevails, particularly when it comes to the structure of government. Section 14 contains critical legal language to allow you to adopt this ordinance in a single reading. Final adoption in one reading, and that language is found in Section 14. This is, under the charter, presumed language, because once you make that determination, your determination as to the existence of an emergency is final and conclusive, which is why we have built that language into the ordinance. I also want to point out, obviously, final adoption requires 5 votes, 2/3 of the body of the town board. Let me go back upstream just a little bit to make sure. There is a reference in Section 5, going back up to Section 5 of the ordinance. There's a reference to continuity of government ordinances previously adopted. At the time I wrote this ordinance, I couldn't get my computer to find that section of the code, but just for reference, for everyone's reference, that's Code Section 2-11-30 that was adopted in 2006 and was actually revisited in a cleanup ordinance back in 2017. And it's basically a stacking of who has the authority to act on behalf of the town, depending on who is able or not able to function in perform their duties. So I just wanted to make sure you understood what that reference was. I am just about finished. Just let me double check and make sure that I've covered everything I think I need to cover, and then open it up for any questions that either you or the public may have, because there is a requirement, of course, on final adoption for public comment before you take a vote. That's all I've got at this point.
questions from Mr. McCarter? Mr. Baker?
Yes, thank you. I have a question on item 4, section 4, the duration.
Okay.
And this can basically be revoked by the mayor in writing. Is that really a vote of the town board authorizing the mayor to do such?
I believe we set this up to not require a vote. That the idea was that the evaporation of the emergency would become apparent to all, and that the mayor would be the person who takes that step for the town.
Okay.
Okay, Dr. Jones?
Yeah, and be on page 26 of the packet, the F item, allocate, expend funds, et cetera. And we know Shane has the authorization now to expend funds within the budget. But if some very large expenditure came along, does the Tabor emergency plug into that? Or would there be some boundaries there whereby he'd have to get a town board approval if it was, over X amount of dollars?
What we know is you have a budget in place, and the budget doesn't necessarily assume those Tabor reserves. I suspect that what would happen is if there were a need to expend those dollars outside of what's already been budgeted, the town manager would eventually come back with a supplemental budget asking for approval of that appropriation, that expenditure, to square up the budget. This section, section F, it needs to be read in full, because that last phrase, without strict compliance compliance with procurement regulations or procedures, that's the key to it. The key is that ordinarily we go through competitive bidding and all of the stuff that assures that people have a fair shot at receiving public funding. In this case, the town manager would have the authority to bypass competitive bidding if it's necessary, again, to meet an emergency. So that's what that particular subsection's about.
And Dr. Jones, if I may, I think an example I would use is if the police department determined it needed some personal protective equipment, they needed some kind of special mask or some kind of equipment, depending on the thresholds, how much that was, instead of going and saying, okay, well, let's go to 3 different suppliers to make sure that we can do that, we'd be able to just say, go ahead, we need the PPE, we need it yesterday, so go ahead and order it. So that's how that provision would be exercised.
I understand that part of it. But let's say, and this is a far out example, say you decided unilaterally, I want to have a ventilator on hand for every town employee.
A what?
Ventilator.
Okay.
Okay? I mean, an extremely large, line item. Is there, and maybe the town board wouldn't agree with that, or would there be some checks and balances there if you get into talking about a lot of dollars?
There could be, honestly, I think that this provision, because this emergency ordinance is really modeled, I think, from one from Breckenridge, and it's probably one that they've had for previous emergencies. And so if you have a flood or a fire or those things, I think that's normally when the town manager may have to say, geez, we need to order in a helicopter to start dropping foam. I mean, money is really expended. I don't really foresee that a whole lot with this. I mean, I don't think there's a reason to not have it in there. But again, I would just say that, I think this board hires me to use my judgment and discretion a lot. I'm certainly not going to go and spend $20 million on ventilators, for Pete's sake. But again, I think that really that provision would be a lot more relevant if we were talking about possible flooding coming in and special equipment for the current crisis, the way it's coming in. I think most of the budget decisions are going to actually be made by this board. This would be like the business outlay that we've talked about earlier and those kinds of things. So again, if the board wants to look at a separate funding amount in there, I mean, that's whatever you're comfortable with. I would certainly be comfortable with any of those things, but I think it's a good provision to have in there, but I don't see that really being exercised by the town manager with this current crisis.
Mr. Kozlowski.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess I probably have the same concerns or reservations, given the breadth of the powers that are listed in Section 6. And I think one change that they made, which works to the better, is all of those powers are qualified in that they have to relate to preparing for, responding, and recovering from the declared emergency. So the powers are limited to dealing with our current situation. I had two questions still remain in that, and that's that the powers are available after consultation with the mayor. And that word implies that our town manager can consult with you, and if you said, no, don't do it, he could say, well, hey, I'm going to anyway. I did consult with you, so I met my standard, but I don't agree. And I'm not sure that if we're already, and I think Mr. McCarger made the point about delegating to a non-elected official a high degree of authority, and I would rather see that section say that it was with the concurrence of the mayor as opposed to consultation before any of these powers were exercised. The subsection I questioned as well on subsection E, it says that the town manager would have the authority to suspend town board and commission meetings. My first read was that it really meant are things like the Board of Adjustment and not this town board, but it really could be read differently and could say that the town manager can suspend this board from meeting, which seems a little overreaching to my mind.
When I was drafting this, Mr. Soslowski, I took special care to make certain that when I refer to this body, it's with a capital T and a capital B, because that's how the charter reads. Mm-hmm. These references to town with a capital T but board with a small b mean things like the tree board and the water and sewer board and those entities that are related but are not this body. So I think that is clear, that distinction is clear throughout, and for purposes of the record tonight, I'm making that clear that I certainly don't intend, and I don't think you intend, to give the town board or town manager, and I'm smiling, the town manager the authority to suspend the legislature. That would be clearly an overreach that is not intended by this document.
Thank you. That's in the record.
Not in case there's any question.
For the record, it's the only part I actually enjoyed.
And I guess that then I have open still that idea of concurrence by the mayor as opposed to just consultation.
Okay. Okay, Mr. Baker.
Well, I'm okay with consultation, mostly because I think we need someone in charge, and I'm not sure if we have concurrence, what happens. That would be my concern with making it a deliberative solution.
Again, I guess my,
Would be the tiebreaker, yeah.
sorry. Again, it goes to the fact that you're giving significant authority to a non-elected official.
That's right.
And the only check on that is for the non-elected official to consult with someone who's representing the people of Windsor. Yeah. And I'm not sure consult is strong enough.
May I speak to that just legally? The charter sets up a council manager form of government. None of what is in this ordinance gives the town manager legislative power that is reserved to the town board. This is really a functional ordinance that allows the town manager to do what the charter gives him the power to do in many cases, but in the event of an emergency, I'll refer to it as a town manager on steroids. But it still doesn't reach into legislative policy or major policy decisions that this body is exclusively reserved, that are reserved exclusively to this body under the charter.
Okay, Mr. Hale and then Ms.
Yeah, I would just like to say, I mean, clearly, there's not one piece of authority in here that I hope to exercise, I mean, truly, there's nothing in there that means that things are going well in Windsor. So there's no way I would issue that, first, without consultation with a lot of town staff, the police department, maybe the fire department, whoever else. And certainly, as far as consulting with the mayor, I mean, I've tried, she and I have spoken, it seems like daily or multiple times per day. during this crisis. So, however the board wanted to structure that, if it was consultation or, I think it's all the same to me, because certainly it would be, if we were going to put a curfew in place, it would be such an obvious public safety thing that would brief the mayor about. I would certainly hope she would say, geez, this is bad, let's do that. So to me, I don't think it makes it worse from my perspective. I think I would want to have our chief elected official also in concurrence with that. So to that extent, I think it still works. I think it gets too watered down if we needed to rally the board together too often. I think sometimes these decisions need to be made, right away. It may be ratified later depending on what they are. But yeah, if it should be, if the board feels more comfortable with the concurrence, I'm certainly very supportive of that as well.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Bennett?
Yeah, I was just looking through this again. I think, Mr. McCarter, you made the point that a lot of these things are functional, operational. Really radical things like closing a business or curfew, there's a time limit on that, 72 hours. So that gives a little bit of balance of power there.
Okay. Any other, okay, Mr. Baker?
Yeah, I'm still, I guess I'm still stuck on the duration of the declaration. I would like to see some mechanism. Section 4.
Okay.
It's page
Where are we?
25 of our packet, 2 of the
Right then.
memo. What if the next mayor loves their timeshare in Cabo and decides to hold electronic meetings and not get rid of this? Is there a way that they could just kind of keep this open for the next 2 years? And
I suppose so. I suppose using an extreme example where the mayor refuses to declare the emergency terminated,
Yes.
and thus all of these powers are, and authority are preserved, could happen, but I rather suspect that that mayor might face a recall.
I guess I just like the tradition of showing up here and pushing the button, and maybe I'm old school, but I think it's important that we get here and we talk, and so I think it's important that when allowed, the meetings come back here under that scenario.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay, Mr. Zaslowski.
And-
Did you want to
So,
further?
and if that becomes a matter of consensus this evening, we would need a motion to amend the ordinance to reflect whatever folks think needs to be done. I mean, this ordinance is presented to you for consideration and approval, but if there is an amendment that needs to be had, it's got to be done tonight because we're only doing one reading.
Well, my thought would be if someone brought up that, hey, we need to rescind this, and it got consensus at a work session, it would be put on the agenda for the entire board. That would be something I would see.
I could see that where someone could propose a resolution that compels the mayor
Yes.
to conclude it. And if not, then that becomes, it does become a political fight, but it also puts the mayor in a position
Right.
of being in opposition to a duly adopted legislative act.
Okay. Mr. Zaslowski?
Yeah, well, it's interesting, because the prior resolution, which we just adopted, in fact, was the resolution that declared the emergency. And the termination of that declaration is left to the town manager. My assumption is if the town manager were to individually declare the emergency is over, then these ordinances don't apply anymore, because there is no emergency. I think what we have is a two-step process. The manager declares the emergency. That trips us into these procedures under this ordinance. But absent that emergency, this is moot. I think that's how they interplay, Mr. McCarter, but that's how I make sense of it. But I guess I want to go back to my point, and I'm sorry, on the concurrence versus consultation. Subparagraph I of that powers of the town manager says that the town manager can suspend or modify the provisions of any ordinance. Now, that sounds like it's touching on legislative activity. So I'm only making the case, Mayor, I believe that you should have the ability to say yea or nay on a particular course of action.
So you're asking for the language to be changed to,
I guess
Concurrence?
I guess I would propose or make a motion that in section 6, line 2, the word consultation be changed to concurrence of instead of consultation with. There.
okay?
Did I hear that as a motion?
I did make a motion.
You did.
Okay.
I'd second it.
Okay? Any further conversation in regards to that?
So we're voting, potentially voting on an amendment right now.
Yeah, can we do that
Yes.
right here in the middle of this conversation?
Sure.
Okay.
And again, Mr. Soslowski, what was the section?
It was page 25, section 6, the powers of the town manager. Essentially, it's line 2. It says currently after consultation with the mayor, and I'm proposing it be changed to after concurrence of the mayor.
Okay. Mr. Bennett?
Let's talk a little bit about the pros and cons of that. I'm trying to think this through. What would be the negative side of doing that?
Gridlock.
If the two couldn't agree, yeah.
Yeah. Does it then come back to the board, or what do we do if, for instance, the mayor and town manager do not agree?
Well,
And the whole purpose is an emergency.
Well, and I bring up a whole nother topic, which is what if the mayor can't be accessed for consultation or for concurrence? I mean, what if they're incapacitated or something like that, you know what I mean? And it doesn't give permissions for the mayor pro tem or for another entity. I mean, I know we're down so deep in the weeds on this thing, but I'm just saying, what if, in a timely manner, what if it's during the middle of the night and the mayor's not answering his phone? Do you see what I mean?
Right.
And they can't be reached, but yet there's a town emergency that needs to be addressed. I'm just bringing up another
Right.
topic, which is there could need to be made a decision and the mayor can't be consulted and or collaborated with.
And we do hire the town manager to use their best judgment, make decisions, and this is a temporary emergency order.
What you're talking about after the emergency has passed, consulting with the mayor, not before,
Yeah.
right? I mean, since the mayor has to declare the emergency is over.
Right,
Or
right, yeah.
consult with the town
We're
manager.
not talking about, the
And
time.
concur that the emergency's over. Well, Dave's asking for concurrence.
On anything.
Yeah.
I believe the motion was an amendment of section 6 to substitute, after consultation with the mayor, to substitute with the concurrence of the mayor in section 6.
Right.
Okay.
But that's to declare the emergency over, not to get concurrence on everything that might come up that the manager needs to make a decision on.
No, it's the latter, Dr. Jones. I believe the suggestion is that all the powers listed under 6 would be after the concurrence of the mayor. So
Well,
that's the
I'll withdraw
suggestion.
the second then.
And if the chair wants to confirm that the second has been withdrawn, then there's still a
So we still
potential.
have a
There's still a
motion?
potential for somebody to second Mr. Soslowski's motion if there is a second.
Okay. Is there a second? Okay. Then it dies for lack of a motion?
Okay, just to be clear, the motion to amend fails for want of a second.
Okay. So then we're back to just discussing the ordinance. Is there any additional questions before? Do you have any public comment or questions, Jess? No, today?
I-
Okay.
A little bit more about enforcement, because I've been asked already about what if I don't comply, as by a business person. So as I read this, if an individual or a business chooses not to comply, it is a misdemeanor. Is that correct?
Yes, a misdemeanor penalties to be as set forth in section 1-4-20 of the code.
What could the consequences be?
So there is a fine, potential fine,
Okay, that's right.
and that is right now in the $2,300 range maximum, but that's ultimately up to the judge to determine.
Okay.
Any additional questions? Okay. Since this is our one and only reading on this, we are taking any public comment at this time. If there's anybody who wished to address the board on this agenda item, now would be the time. And we're not seeing any, okay?
One more minute, please.
Okay. So while she's waiting to see if there's any final comment from the public, any final comment or questions from the board? Mr. McCarger, we have everything necessary for the record at this point in time to
You do.
move forward?
Does require 5 votes.
Okay.
There are no questions.
Okay, so there are no questions. Is there a motion then to move ahead to approve ordinance number 2020-1605?
Madam Mayor, I move that we approve ordinance number 2020-1605 as presented this evening.
Second.
We have a motion on the floor from Mr. Rennemeyer and a second from Mayor Pro Tem Bennett approving ordinance number 2020-1605. Anything further? Seeing none, I'll call for the question then. All in favor of this, passing this ordinance as presented, signify with aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It passes unanimously with 7 votes. So moving on to item 3, the public hearing, a conditional use grant for the temporary modular classrooms and temporary parking area for Timberline Church. Joe Lethumers, the owner, applicant, Sam Ellison, United Civil Group, the applicant's representative. It is quasi-judicial. I'm going to seek a motion to move into the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Motion on the floor from Mr. Rennemeyer and a second from Mr. Baker to open the public hearing. All in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are open, and before that, now we are open for public hearing. We will allow for comment via email or through the Zoom platform during this meeting. If you are participating via computer, please enter your question or comment in the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen. If you are on the phone, please listen for your name or phone number, as a moderator will call out who is allowed to speak at that time. We will unmute participants one at a time, at which time you will be given 3 minutes to speak. So with that, the public hearing is now open, and we are ready for presentation from Mr. Ballstead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, Town Board. This is a public hearing for a conditional use grant for 2 temporary modular classrooms and recycled asphalt parking lot for a period of 3 years. The subject site is located directly south of the intersection of Crossroads Boulevard and New Liberty Road, adjacent to the existing Timberline Church location. The subject zoning is residential mixed use and surrounded by residential uses to the north, south, and west, with industrial uses to the east. The conditional use grant is being reviewed in accordance with section 16.710 of the municipal code, and it is a conditional use grant because the temporary modulars and the temporary parking surface are not uses by right or uses that are permanent in the code. This is the site plan and depictions of existing modular classrooms that were approved previously, and the church is planning a move to their new location up near the roundabout, just south of the roundabout at 7th and Crossroads. And this is for the 3-year period in the interim. The notification was sent out in accordance with the code. And the analysis in accordance with section 16750. The criteria, number 1, the character and quality of the area in which the use will be located. Again, it's surrounded by residential uses on all sides except to the east, and the modulars are similar to the existing modular on site at the existing current church location. The physical appearance of the use is, again, similar in architecture and landscaping to the existing modular and parking area. The building will be located appropriately on the lot. They will utilize the same access to and from the site that is in place for the existing church and modular classroom. The parking will be expanded to accommodate the 2 new modular uses or classrooms. And the traffic will be a minimal increase, but the parking is being expanded to accommodate the additional traffic or the additional parking needs. Storm drainage has been accounted for in the drainage plan for the impervious surface of the property, and the CUG does include some drainage improvements in accordance with those plans. They will be, this statement is correct in the memo, but not in the presentation. They will be doing some more landscaping around the temporary parking lot. There are no hazardous conditions that we are aware of, and the general compatibility of the proposed use is similar to the existing parking and modular use. At their March 18th, 2020 meeting, the Planning Commission forwarded a recommendation of approval of the conditional use grant to the town board as presented. Staff requests that the following be entered into the record: the application and supplemental materials, staff memo and supporting documents, any testimony received during the public hearing, and the recommendation. And then lastly, these are the approval criteria, once again, from the municipal code regarding conditional use grants. I would also point out that I believe Chief Planner Garland Malone is on the line, as well as the applicants, if there are any questions for them.
Okay. Any questions for Mr. Volstead? Dr. Jones?
Scott, you said there are modulars there.
I believe there's one modular that's already been approved previously.
Okay, are there any bathroom requirements when modulars are used for these purposes?
I don't know off the top of my head, but I'm assuming that they're probably using the restroom facilities within the church building, the permanent building.
That's what it says.
But yeah, they will need to meet all building code requirements.
Okay.
Okay. Any additional questions? Mr. Sislowski?
Thank you, Mayor. Just curious only on the timing of this, because it seems something must have changed in their operations to require 2 units now. And it's a long period, it seems to me, 3 years. If it were just preparing for their new facility, assuming that isn't going to be done for 3 years, I'm curious how these are being used and what was the expansion that required it. Not that I'm overly concerned, it seems to be that's their model for expanding services, but it seems like a long period.
The applicant is on the phone.
Okay.
Available to speak.
Okay, great.
Joe?
Thank you, Mayor and Town Board. The reason why we're looking at the additional classroom space is we need a little bit more growth in the church congregation as far as adults are concerned. We have the numbers as far as the children are concerned. We just don't have the space to accommodate that. So as we see growth in the church, we will be using more of the mods, and then we'll be able to finance the move up to the top of the hill.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you. Any additional questions? Does the applicant have anything further they wish to add?
No, I do not. Thank you.
Okay. Well, this is the public hearing segment.
Paul has something
Okay,
from stand up.
so we do have a question coming, or a comment?
Paul, you are on now?
No, I did not have a question.
Sorry.
Okay, that's okay.
It's good
That's okay.
practice.
Okay. Is there anybody who wishes to address the town board on this public hearing item? And we'll give just another minute because we know we have a backlog a little bit before it shows up of time. I guess while we're waiting, how soon from the time that this, if this were to be approved, do you know? Do they plan to, I mean, I guess now some of those timing ideas might have changed a little bit with everything, but would it be the beginning of summer or?
Joe is unmuted at this moment.
We would start the process now of getting the modulars ordered, and we hope to have it in process by the beginning of summer and completed by the fall.
Okay, thank you.
There's no public comment.
Okay, we don't have any public comment, and if there are no further questions from the town board, I would seek a motion to close public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Motion on the floor for Mr. Rennemeyer with a second from Mr. Baker to close public hearing. All in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Public hearing is now closed. Moving on to item 4, the conditional use grant for 2 temporary modular classrooms and temporary parking area. Timberline Church, Joe Luthmers, the owner, applicant Sam Ellison, United Civil Group, the applicant's representative. Quasi judicial, anything further you need to provide for us this evening, Scott?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Anything further from any town board members? Okay, if not, is there a motion to approve?
Madam Mayor, I move that we approve the conditional use grant for 2 temporary modular classrooms and temporary parking area for Timberline Church.
Second.
We have a motion on the floor from Mr. Rennemeyer and a second from Dr. Jones approving this conditional use grant. All in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And it passes unanimously. Moving on to item 5, ordinance number 2020-1602, an ordinance approving the Overland 368 annexation to the town of Windsor. This is second reading and legislative action. Mr. Hornbeck.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, Town Board. This is second reading of the
I
annexation.
just call him Mr. Hornbeck? I'm sorry, Mr. Ballstead. I was reading the script.
You may
And for the
hear-
record, we do have Mr. Ballstead in front of us, not Mr. Hornbeck.
You may hear from Mr. Hornbeck yet, so. This annexation is being reviewed, or has been reviewed in accordance with Article 1, Chapter 15 of the Municipal Code, which addresses the procedure for annexing land into town. The subject property is located between 15th Street and State Highway 257, so it stretches the entire mile from essentially the property across the street from the new Public Works campus all the way over to State Highway 257. Subject property is depicted on the land use map and the comprehensive plan as single-family residential. These are just the 3 pages from the annexation plat. It's in a few different parcels. And this is the master plan. The subject property will be accessed off of County Road 70, which currently doesn't exist. So between this property and the property to the north, the Takankawa annexation, the construction of Weld County Road 70 will be necessary to provide access. And then they have a loop road through the property, as well as some trail and drainage and other amenities, open space amenities through the middle of the property. There's also a school site adjacent to Highway 257, and then the darker orange is the higher density property, part of the property. The notification was done in accordance with the code, included several surrounding neighboring properties. At their January 27th, 2020 meeting, the town board adopted Resolution 2020-007, declaring these findings of fact and setting the Planning Commission and Town Board hearing dates. The application is consistent with the comprehensive plan, and I'll just touch on each of these very, very quickly since this is second reading. But it's consistent with the goal that we maintain the character of the community while accommodating future growth. The master plan proposes development that's consistent with the land use map, develop new neighborhoods adjacent to the town core. The property is approximately 1 mile north of downtown. Support diverse housing in residential neighborhoods. The next item on the agenda is a planned unit development, which will allow for a variety of lot sizes and housing types to serve a wider range of family sizes. Promoting multimodal connectivity to increase the neighborhood access. The construction of Weld County Road 70 will not only benefit this project, but also provide an alternative east-west corridor north of Main Street. So it will provide connectivity benefits for the entire community. Foster diversity of housing types. Again, they will have a diverse lot size and housing type. Maintaining Windsor's safe and healthy community and coordinate annexation and development with community services and utility providers. The connection of County Road 70 and extension of water and sewer utilities will be in accordance with the master plan. Relationship to the strategic plan, the infrastructure aspect of the strategic plan. Again, the connection of Weld County Road 70 is a big part of that. Quality of life, the 12-acre school site along Highway 257 and the open space and regional trail amenities are proposed. And then downtown is only about a mile away, so that's close proximity to our core. Staff requests that the following be entered into the record: the application, petition, and supplemental materials, any testimony received during the public hearing, the staff memo and supporting documents, and the recommendation. At their March 4th meeting, the Planning Commission forwarded a recommendation of approval of the annexation and zoning designation, and the town board approved the first reading on March 9th. I don't believe anything has changed since that first reading. However, the applicant and I believe Mr. Hornbeck is available and may have something to add as well.
Okay,
Would you like me to give you Mr. Hornbeck first?
sure.
Paul, you are on.
So just one thing to add, which is that the annexation agreement has not been finalized yet. So just for the record, the annexation ordinance will not be recorded until that is finalized. So we're just working through that with the applicant still, and that's all.
Okay.
So then the town board might want to add that as a condition of approval, that the annexation plat would be recorded after the annexation agreement has been approved.
Okay. And how do we do that, Mr. McCarger, if we want to make that a condition? Is that by a motion or just a suggestion?
Given how important this condition is, because ordinarily you would not see this until we had the annexation agreement done, but in this case, what I would recommend is that we have a motion to amend the ordinance to include a specific provision that the ordinance and the annexation plat would not be recorded until an annexation agreement is approved by the town board. So it would require a motion to amend the ordinance.
Okay. Is there a board member who wants to make that motion? Or I know, Mr. Sislowski, you had some questions. Or did I see your hand go up? Or, and does the applicant themselves also want to make a comment?
Let me unmute them all.
So let's, do you mind if we hear from them first and then, okay.
Julia?
From outer space.
Hold on. Todd, Zeta, and Eric, you are both on.
Mayor and Town Board, Eric Seidel here. We do not have any additional input other than what Scott had presented.
Okay.
In terms of the annexation agreement, we are currently working with the town attorney and our attorney to resolve the language that's within that agreement, and we expect that to conclude here in the near future.
Okay. Do you have anybody else, Jess, who wishes to make comment? Okay. So I believe we have all comment from applicant and from our staff. We do have somebody who made a suggestion, I guess, or recommendation for a motion. I don't know if anybody wants to move forward with that or just additional questions. Mr. Sislowski?
No, I'm okay. I just one question on procedurally. If we amend this ordinance here at second reading, do we really need to duplicate a second reading on the revised ordinance at some future date?
It depends on how you frame the motion. If the motion is a motion to approve with an additional provision that specifically conditions recording on execution and approval of an annexation agreement, then you can do it in one step.
Okay,
I've
Dr.
got one
Jones?
question. Scott, can you go back to land use map? Yep. Is the property between this annexation and the lake, is that annexed yet or not?
This is part of a larger enclave, and I think maybe the other presentation shows it better. But the property directly to the south, there are a few other properties in a larger enclave around this. And then to the east, on the east side of Highway 257, that annexation has been completed. So the enclave is completely between 15th Street and Highway 257.
Okay, and is it just north of the tracks, or is all the way over to 15 is still an enclave?
So,
Where the SFR is?
yeah, this property is, I believe, multiple parcels and still in unincorporated county.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Okay, Mr. Sislowski.
Okay, well, I'd like to make a motion then. I'd like to make a motion that this ordinance be approved on second reading, subject to amending a requirement, adding a requirement that this ordinance and the accompanying Overland PUD master plan not be recorded until the annexation agreement is also finalized and recorded.
Second.
Okay. We have a first and a second, but we are in second reading, so we do need to ask for public comment.
Correct.
So do you, so before we take up your motion, Jess, do you have anybody who, from the public, is there any public out there who wish to address the town board on this agenda item? This would be the time. Okay, we do have one?
No.
1 minute.
Oh, give her 1 minute, okay. Okay, we don't have any public comment moving forward. Any final questions from town board or concerning the ordinance as amended? If not, we do have a motion on the floor from Mr. Kozlowski, and I believe a second from Mayor Pro Tem Bennett. Okay, all in favor of accepting this ordinance as amended signify with aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The amended ordinance is carried unanimously. Moving on to item 6, ordinance number 2020-1603, an ordinance approving the Overland PUD overlay rezoning. Again, second reading, quasi judicial. Mr. Balstead, anything further?
Regarding the annexation?
No,
Or the-
I mean, well, what we're moving, the 2020-1603. So now you're going to give presentation on that, correct?
Right. This
Okay.
is the rezoning that will establish the planned unit development overlay.
Yes.
So section 16.520 outlines the process for rezoning in town. And the rezoning process is created, or is the process which is used to create a planned unit development overlay, because it's essentially an amendment to the zoning map. And the purpose of the planned unit development is to provide flexibility in land planning and development, resulting in amenable relationships between buildings and ancillary uses, and permitting more intensive use of land where well-related open space and recreational facilities are integrated into the overall design. Again, the property is located between 15th Street and Highway 257. This is the slide that I was looking for the last. This depicts the enclave. All of the properties that aren't in color are currently not in town, so that's an enclave. And the subject property will be colored yellow after the completion of the annexation and zoning. This is the rezoning plat. And again, the master plan showing the loop road and access to County Road 70. The color illustration. And these are some excerpts from the PUD standards. The PUD is specifically to allow for a variety of lot sizes and a variety of product types, a variety of setbacks and offsets to create a specific neighborhood character that is outlined in the application materials. Again, the PUD purpose is to provide flexibility in land planning, to encourage unity and diversity in land development, to encourage planned development on a site without customary subdivision into single lots, to provide for and encourage the preservation of and enhancement of desirable natural landscape, such as the open space amenities through the middle of the property, to provide reasonable standards and criteria, such as the lot sizes and setbacks, and to provide a procedure which can relate to the design and layout of the project. The proposed PUD is consistent with the intent of the PUD zone district. It's also consistent with the transportation master plan goals and policies. The proposed PUD will directly access the new County Road 70 that would be installed with the project. Relation to public utilities and community facilities, again, the project is near existing infrastructure and just north of existing downtown. In relation to the general pattern of urban development, the proposed PUD is in general compliance with the comp plan, and the location is close to downtown. It's consistent with the comprehensive plan growth framework and neighborhoods adjacent to town core, residential areas framework plan, the support diverse housing and residential neighborhoods, again, a diversity of housing types and lot sizes, multimodal connectivity, again, this is the connectivity through the extension of County Road 70. Conservation design and traditional neighborhood design for new residential growth This is where they're proposing some of the standards that address front porches and garage placement that's set back, so that it's not a garage-dominated streetscape. Things of that nature are in the planned unit development regulations that they're proposing. And then again, the diversity of housing types is consistent throughout. Relationship to the strategic plan is, again, infrastructure, quality of life, and downtown. The notification area. And the recommendation is at their March 4th, 2020 meeting, the Planning Commission forwarded a recommendation of approval of the PUD overlay, and Town Board approved on first reading on March 9th, 2020. Staff requests that the following be entered into the record: the application, petition, and supplemental materials, any testimony received during the public hearing, or in this case, it's not a formal public hearing, it's a public comment under second reading, staff memorandum and supporting documents, and the recommendation. And these are a bit small, but these are the PUD review considerations from the municipal code. And again, the applicant and Mr. Hornbeck, I believe, are available for any questions or details.
Okay.
I'm gonna unmute Paul.
Okay.
Paul, you have the mic?
I have nothing further.
Okay.
Todd, you have the mic?
Nothing from the design team here.
Okay.
Hold on. Eric and Zeta, you have the mic?
We have nothing to add.
Okay, one more. Julia, you have the mic?
Nothing further.
Okay. Okay, any questions from Town Board? Okay, Mr. Sislowski.
Yeah, Mayor, in the first reading of this, there were a number of us, I think, that voiced an interest in having this clearly connect to regional trail networks and connectivity with the overall layout of our parks and rec system. And I believe we were kind of told, yes, that we will keep that in mind, but we really don't at this point. Or is there a way at this point to build in a requirement that says that will happen? Or is it premature and would come at a later date?
Well, if we can get Paul back on the line, I believe that the trail connection through the property is planned to connect all the way from Highway 257 to 15th Street, which would give us connectivity, or at least get us closer to connectivity to the Windsor Lake Trail just to the south.
Paul, you are unmuted.
Yeah, that's correct. The Trails Master Plan does call for that connection, and the exact route would be determined at the time of subdivision plat.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anything else? And again, this is second reading, so just if there's anybody out there who wish to address the Town Board, this would be the time to use your Q&A feature to provide that question. And she's going to let me know if we have any. And
I'm seeing none.
okay, we don't have anybody who wish to make comment on this ordinance reading, so is there a motion to approve?
Madam Mayor, I move that we approve ordinance number 2020-1603.
Second.
We have a motion on the floor from Mr. Rennemeyer and a second from Mr. Baker, approving ordinance number 2020-1603. All in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And the ordinance passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on to item D, communications. Communications from our town attorney.
Nothing other than that we have an executive session that is scheduled for after this segment of the agenda.
Okay? We don't have any staff except for Mr. Ballstead and Ms. Iker here this evening. Any further communications from town staff? Mr. Ballstead?
Just that if town board has any comments on the Diamond Valley subdivision 8th filing, Lot 1, Ultimate Support Systems site plan that's in your packets under communications, to forward those comments to staff, please. Thanks.
Thank you.
Scott,
Yes.
can you tell us what type of business that is?
Yeah, it's, they manufacture music equipment and related musical equipment.
Okay, thank you. Communication, oh, Ms. Iker.
I just wanted to let you know that ballots have been mailed out, and
She says louder, or,
Yeah, just project out there.
ballots have been mailed out, so the drop-off location is actually at the Community Recreation Center instead of here at Town Hall, or they can be mailed in.
okay, thank you. Communications from our town manager.
Yes, Mayor, just a quick reminder that, as we discussed earlier, we will have a special call-in meeting this Thursday at 4 p.m., and that'll be to discuss the emergency ordinance to get some business support, so I just wanted to remind the board about that.
Okay. Communications from town board members. I do want to mention just a couple of things before we move into an executive session. First and foremost, I want to thank some folks who made this meeting possible, because we are, as a town board, going to be meeting virtually like this for a while until everything is deemed safe, that we can come back and have our regular board meetings sitting side by side. So I want to say Jess Humphreys, who's sitting up here, and we've got somebody who's behind the scenes that we never see, but Mackenzie Payne, who have worked really hard to make sure that we have a seamless, working, moving meeting and able to include everybody. I want to make sure that we thank them. I want to thank Kim Overholt, our communications director, and Stacy Miller, our economic development folks, because if you go to our town website right now, there's a special tab under the COVID button that if you click on that, they are working hard to make sure that all of you get updated, accurate, good information. And now we have a special town, a button there as well for businesses, so our business folks can get the most updated information. So I want to thank everybody again for joining us in this virtual meeting. I appreciate everyone's patience and willingness to stay Windsor strong. This is a very important time that we need to all make sure that we are heeding by the warnings and, the current rulings that are out there in order to try to control and have this epidemic come to an end as quickly and as soon as possible. So I want to just make sure, again, that you all realize that we still are here. The town is still, active and providing its services. We make safety our number one priority with police. And so we want to thank all of the town staff for adjusting and our town manager for acting so quickly to make sure that we are proactively prepared and on top of things for you all out there. So with that, we'll say good night, and I will look to see if we have a motion to jump into executive session.
Madam Mayor, I move that we move into executive session pursuant to Colorado Revised Statute 24-6-402, subsection 4E and I, for the purpose of determining positions relative to matters that may be subject to negotiations, developing strategy for negotiations, and instructing negotiators with respect to the Brinkman exclusive negotiation agreement, and a second executive session pursuant to Colorado Revised Statute 24-6-402, subsection 4 and B, as in boy, to confer with the town attorney for the purposes of receiving legal advice on specific legal questions concerning the Brinkman exclusive negotiation agreement.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor from Mr. Rennemeyer to move into an executive session. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion on the floor from Mr. Rennemeyer with a second from Mr. Wilson to move into an executive session. All in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So I will prepare to get everything ready so that we can move into executive session, because we're going to be staying in our places here as soon as they give us the sign that we are